think we're recording, so I'll send this out to everybody on it. Main thing, the first 5 minutes here is probably the most important thing, even, and it's not really about content that's necessarily like today. Just getting our calendar together because people have already been asking. On today's quiz, I know it's chapter 24, banking, that I said was due. There's no specific questions from that chapter. Okay. So that kind of, for those one or two people, or maybe 5 or 15 who haven't read it, I think you might be A-okay. Not that I would like, insinuate or think about who has not read it. Americana, banking, not on the quiz today. Hello. But anyway, so that's no specific questions on there. Don't feel like you wasted your time if you read it. It's a good background knowledge for that. So that's today. And today will be FDR and the New Deal. We'll go over a little bit more in details in class. I'm not wasting your time. There's a couple things I'll go over this morning that you're going to see that relates to probably things that's covered in the quiz for sure in there. So there's a couple things in there. Go ahead. What's that? Oh yeah, for sure. You have to understand about that. And then how did FDR address the banking crisis from the first 100 days to the FDIC and the Glass-Steagall Act? I'll get more into the New Deal programs today in detail in class. The main thing about today is that we're going to separate the first New Deal programs in class later on today and the second New Deal programs. And the reason why I had to come with the second New Deal. We don't have to know all of the programs because it's a really periodic table of programs. All right. And know like why I got into a little, again, some opposition into these programs and criticisms. So we'll go over that. Now I just want to go ahead, go back to the calendar. On Thursday, we'll slowly get into World War II. The amazing kind of foresight that FDR had to see that probably the United States is going to get involved in this war. This is before Pearl Harbor, you know. This is even in the mid 1930s before the invasion of Poland. Seeing the future, preparing the United States to maybe get into war versus Congress who wants to make sure that we're isolated and neutral and no part into it. So it's a really big conflict and really big argument or political argument about how from cash and carry, lend-lease, for freedom of speech, how it's going to get us into involvement into World War II. That's on Thursday. No quiz on Thursday, but be prepared for that because all that material will be on the quiz on Friday. Friday, there's a couple of things going on. Friday, I will introduce the subject level project. Me and Cameron's already been talking about it. Like, it'll give you choices and it should not be as daunting as like a grade level project that's going to require like 23 hours of a day. Once again, to do this project. It's going to be kind of similar to the dorm room project, but they give you some choices. And speaking of Cameron, go ahead and he got accepted in North Carolina State, so I'll give my hand for getting accepted. All due to my recommendation, I'm sure. Right. So, but anyway, very good, Cameron. So that's on Friday, and we'll take quiz number 5, and that will try to get to the end of World War II as much as possible. Apush does not really get into Midway, Stalingrad, the Battle of the Bulge, more about getting into the war with FDR's speeches, Atlantic Charter, and what's going on domestically here with all our domestic work with factories, the Double V campaign, how it's affecting people over here in the United States doing on the home front, as they say. So it's not too much of that, but we'll be try to cover that in a couple of days. All right. Great. Any questions about that? All right, so but that's important, just knowing what's ahead, and you can think about, well, we have this today, later on today, he's talking about the New Deal programs. On Thursday, we're getting into the war, and on Friday, kind of complete it, and then we have quiz number 5. So important. Anyway, so give me your timeline or years, and there's no incorrect answer to this, of the Great Depression. When did it start and when did it end? And tell me your justification. And there's not really a wrong answer unless you say something like, well, it began in 1920 and it ended in 1950. There's no real wrong answer with your range of years. And I like to hear your reasoning behind this because there's no correct answer here in the way. Go ahead. What would you say?
I was the book said that it started in 1829 and ended in 1833, but it says that things got a lot better by sorry 19.
I know everybody would say that. It's fine.
By 1953, it was better, but it still wasn't really fixed until
Right.
later on.
So you're saying about a 4-year period.
I'm saying that that's what the book said, and I'm saying I don't agree with that.
Okay,
I
yeah.
feel like they had improved by 33, but they weren't quite out of the woods.
No, I agree. Thank you for that assessment. I can't believe that the textbook would say that. Maybe they say because really you're gonna have a 1936, 37 get some of the highest unemployment rates of the whole Great Depression. I agree with you.
They said there was a later dip down, but they said that 33 is essentially the end.
Yeah, it is not. Definitely is not this. So we can all agree it is not a duration of 4 years. We know it's not a duration of that in a kind of, historical type of sense here. All right, good. This is very interesting to hear. Like, Malika, what do you think? So that from 1929 to 1941, really say the end of 1941 in a way. Those are good years, and that's probably where most historians or people would say, and most students will remember. And if you wrote that in an essay, be correct. Okay, in there. So, why you say 1929? What's the?
I'm thinking about the stock market crash.
Yeah, in October, all of that. So, anybody else have any kind of? What I want to show you, what I will say, you're correct. I want you to know that. So I don't want you to keep on emphasizing. That's correct. 1929, 1941. I will kind of just make my argument that I'm going to be thinking about years where unemployment went over 10%. And that would be, and you had this on your do now from last week, from 1931 to 1941. So, and it kind of shows you, Malika is correct. A lot of historians, a lot of people say the start of it really is like really 1920. Even this starts at 1929, but the average unemployment rate is really during the Depression is over 15%. Today it's around 3.6%, and we go crazy when it gets near 10. So the average, and you're talking about in 1933, 1934, as we were saying, was like 28%. Now that's national. In some states, that's an average. In some states, it was like 40% or 45% in there. There was nothing really in the harshest times of the Depression. So you have to think about that. But 1940, so that's good to have that in your mind and what it is. I give you some more statistics because I'm always thinking that I really want to take our time about getting the mood about how bad it was. I told you, we will flip out whoever the president is, whatever the government, when unemployment starts increasing 1% or 2%, unemployment is going up to 7%. We will go crazy. Right? Our gross national product from 1929 to 1933 really dips by 25%. And if you see in the news, and I know you don't pay attention to it, you know what they look at now? 0.1 and 0.2%. It's dipping. And they go to gross domestic product today, but it doesn't matter. So I just want you to think about that. Our net exports go down between those years by 75%. What is partly that is due to? Tariffs. Very good. The Harley Smooth tariff and just the overall worldwide depression. And the last statistic to get the mood again, and I've mentioned this before, and I think maybe one or two you remember. 1933, 1934, 1935. The only time in American history, since the recording since the late 18th century, that more people left this country than came in. That's the only time in our history. And I think looking at these statistics, you're like, oh, I understand why. you know, that's the only time. So that should tell you, again, what is going on in here. Yes.
So like I understand that people are migrating to like Europe and stuff during the Great Depression, but like since it was a national depression in a way, how did that really benefit them? Because Europe basically just followed what we did.
Yeah, but you're saying that here's what people do, and here's what it's a lot of family stuff going on. Most people come to this country because their aunt is here, their mom is here. And surely that's what that anchors, like, people coming. So they had people in the so-called old world too, and they figured they'd come back either to help them or better to stabilize something at home. Or they tried to come here in the 20s, during the boom times, and it didn't work out. So you're kind of left homeless, or maybe not a good opportunity, maybe not even homeless, but you just hard to find where better to go back home. You might have a house there too, matter of fact. So or home there this is stable, and more people left. During the 1920s, more Latin American immigrants, particularly from Mexico, were welcome. So in the 1930s, they were not, and a lot of times we went through deportation. But in that mass deportation from California and Arizona, there was Mexican American citizens who were deported too at that time. That's kind of the sad story of that. I was just telling the other class in California, on the eastern border of California, not the southern border, there were armed guards in the eastern border of California. Why is that? What is the thing is, who are they trying to prevent from coming into California? If they're on the eastern border there around Nevada and Arizona, who are they trying to prevent from coming into California unless you had $30?
People from the Dust Bowl? Is it you?
Who do you say tonight?
The people from the Dust Bowl?
People from the Dust Bowl, Okies and the Arkies, as they were nicknamed, preventing Americans coming into their another part of America. Can you try to comprehend that? How bad it was? Because people were saying, "Hey, California, I heard there's opportunities, and then plus the warm weather, there's oranges, there's fruit to pick, and working it out there." And people started flooding in there, and so the California governor says, "Look, unless you have money, and also too, we can't have everybody come to California, or it's going to be just as bad." That's the situation. Next thing, this is more towards, kind of getting a little bit about the culture and stuff like that. What do you think is the mentality of most Americans at the start of the deepest parts of Depression 33 and 34? What are they thinking about them knowing the future? What is their mentality about, like, what are they optimistic, pessimistic, or they kind of seem kind of despondent? What do you think is probably the general mood after about like, a couple of years of downturn? What do you think?
Well, I think generally, even like at the beginning, we probably thought that it wouldn't last that long, but like maybe towards probably halfway, we're kind of hoping that it would turn around, but still thinking that like, it would just maybe go away over time.
It would go away. You're getting into about 3 or 4 years because they had so much prosperity, it seemed, in the 1920s. People were becoming a little bit pessimistic. The general mood was getting kind of like, not only a physical depression, but a mental depression too as well. That like things are really like not going. I don't know about the future of America. You know, I don't know. And I think FDR sensed this, and that's one of the things why he did the fireside chats to try to reassure them. Hey, things are going to get better. I'm not going to say prosperity is just around the corner like Hoover, but we're going to do some things, to make sure that things are going to get better for the United States. But people are pretty like this could be the end. All right, could be the end because they're probably seeing some things that we just read about, looked at, that was dramatized, that you can see why. I told you, I don't know if people can handle those depression conditions to today. I don't think we could. I'm talking to myself too. I don't think we can handle. We'll go crazy. We go crazy because the snow is coming. All right, and everybody's buying like going to the grocery stores and it's flooded and all the bread is gone. We go crazy. We go absolutely nuts. Where all the gas is up, like again by 50 cents. Now, what are we gonna do? I don't know. You know, there's a pipeline that like makes the gas is the shortage of that. What we're gonna do? These things are relatively, in relative terms, to the Great Depression is nothing. But for us, we go crazy. Right? And the thing is, and I told you, what you have and then you miss. And that's the thing is that's what they're just missing a lot and they're missing a lot of opportunities and they don't know they can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. Good enough. Keep that in mind, please. Keep that in mind. We will actually look at some movie clips about in the 1930s about the culture and stuff because movies, sports, they always do what radio entertainment and during that time try to do what during these bad times. What do they do like that? And they do to this today if we're like maybe feeling down or something. What do they do? What do movies and stuff do? What do you think they do? And in sports and everything, yeah. Distract us. And that's something that's always been good for Western society is just distract everybody. Because next thing you know, they you're distracted because people are. It feels like the French Revolution in some cities. They're breaking into stores, some of them like that. They're all trying to feed themselves and things. It does seem pretty like 200 years ago. That's how challenging it's getting, and it distracts us. It makes us feel like a little bit better. Oh, let me just enjoy, again, this music. I enjoy this dancing like that, or go see, baseball, or go see, hear about Joe Louis boxing. Good. Next thing on there that says here, how did FDR change the role of the federal government? And you have to know this for today and for the quiz here. He finally answers the question, will the federal government be involved in our lives up until 2020 and present times? And the answer is yes. And the federal government will expand and keep expanding, no matter what political party. Now, yes, there will be Republicans whose modern philosophy is to shrink. Well, actually, it's been their 20th century philosophy to shrink government. But you will not hear a Bush or a Trump say, get rid of Medicare, get rid of Social Security, get rid of the FDA. Now, shrink it, cut it, do some things. They're not saying get rid of money for interstate highways. They will not say that. It is no longer will go back to the 20s or to the Gilded Age of absolute free market economy, a laissez-faire. There's going to be some regulation, some security, some type of backup in here. So federal government will be in people's lives. And we can debate if you want to get into some college class about has that helped us or hurt us in the long run to that fact. But there's no doubt the fact that government is here to stay in our lives. A lot of people argue for the better. Some people say no, it's worse for the dependency. So you must know that it's changed the role of federal government. Last time in our time period, it was kind of in our lives, was what time period before FDR? 20s, 1900s? When's the last time the government has really kind of gotten involved in regulation and things? The what? Well, probably a little bit later. What time period was the government involved? Again, this is review. Okay, you got the 1930s. I'm backing up and I'm trying to do my review in my head. Like, well, the last time government really started cracking down on business was progressive era. All right, so maybe you say that's so important to know those patterns. What came before the progressive era, and what is the kind of philosophy of government? Laissez-faire. Very good. There you go. Cool. You gotta know these patterns through here. You have to know. But now, all the way up until this end, you're gonna have some kind of government kind of like involvement. But you will have presidents and political parties debate how much they should be involved. There you go. Get it up. All right. So, FDR, if you um, go quickly, in here, looking at, you see some of the cartoons in here about what FDR should, get involved in the programs. Tanaya, you get to share a document or somebody, what's the first political cartoon? Somebody, just take a quick look. All right, yeah. Now, what's that one to the far right? I'm kind of worried about. What's the main, before you get into people, Coughlin, Huey Long, and Townsend, what's the general argument that was FDR doing? Was that far right cartoon? What's the criticism? It's socialism. All right. Now, here's what is always the key when you hear that word today. People, socialism is the nice word, actually. Socialism is always the good word. Really, it's always implying what's the next step? What is the next step to socialism that we hate? Communism, anarchy, total control. Our lives have ended. We're like, waiting in line for bread and you have some kind of dictator ruling. It's always in there. And that is not the American way. Very good. So, an historical situation is, of course, New Deal. Oh, thank you. So, the next cartoon, I want to ask you if you can look at FDR being the doctor, all right? And he's, who's the patient? It might be hard to see who's the patient. Uncle Sam. It's hard to see Uncle Sam unless you think about, him in the hat and then like, dressed up around, but it's implying it's Uncle Sam. All right. And then he's got Congress and say, and what do you see as far as all the remedies? What's on there? What's all the remedies that he's already been taking? All the organization, and you will not have to remember all of them like that. The AAA, the CCC, and all those. You don't have to remember all of them. So uh, that's the ones, and he's saying that like try this, and if it doesn't work, try something else. Now here's the thing that might catch you. Is this pretty favorable? What would give you the idea that this is a favorable cartoon for FDR? Is there anything that if you look and notice in there, looking at the drawings, or what maybe think that is kind of a favorable cartoon towards FDR?
Features about him are not organized as in that way. He's standing up tall. They're not like playing on them as a circle.
Yeah, and you know what? I've always said this, Dylan. One of the most amazing things. All his cartoons that you see, he's playing football, baseball. He's on a ship sailing. He's never drawn. I mean, it's not like FDR could control the press inside here. Like when it comes to the White House, he says, "Don't take any pictures of me, like in my wheelchair, like that." He didn't have the classic wheelchair, but this chair on wheels. That don't take any pictures. He could control that. I don't know. He didn't really control the national press. Nobody drew him, even like when they did criticize him. But you're right. Notice the demeanor sometimes of the characters. Go ahead. Do you want to add on to that? Okay, yeah. And the smile of Uncle Sam, he looks a little bit placated. He looks a bit kind of satisfied in this notion. Okay? So looks a little bit satisfied that he's okay. Very good. All right. So, and more remedies in here. And by the way, why does he need more remedies? What's going on? What do we know about the Great Depression? What do we know already that you know we talked about this beginning? What do we know?
Economic crisis.
But why does he say, oh, well, I tried this. I need to try some more. Because of why? What's going on? And we just talked about this at the beginning. You got kind of, you know, try to put two and two together in a way. Yeah, I mean, it's still a depression. It does not. It's not the solution. It's really good about making it better with relief, recovery, and reform. But it's not like unemployment goes down under 10% for a majority of his. Definitely not in his first term, and then you're thinking about not even in his second term as well. And that's why he has to come up with the second deal. All right, the next picture. Well, that's a photograph. And what's the irony here?
Well, it's during the depression, so it's not really a high.
The people standing in line for some type of relief. Okay? And we don't know what that's for. You would not know. But you would think like, wow, that's very ironic. It's almost thinking that the billboard went up not during the depression, right? You can almost make that assumption, you know, and it says that's more taken out of context in the 20s and the families, and you see what has happened to us and how we never want to go back to that. All right. So, and the next one I really like because for today's quiz, court packing is on there. You know, some of you already know what that means, like that in there. That second, he gets elected in 1936. Does he win? Does he really beat down his opponent, like again 1936? Does he win an overwhelming election? Yes. He always in all his elections, but that was one of them. He only loses 2 states. He's feeling a little bit sure of himself. Some of the New Deal programs are declared unconstitutional. You see the couple of bats, they tell you the two main ones on there. What two that were declared unconstitutional? Yes, the Agricultural Adjustment Act and the National Recovery Administration. What does he want to do? Well, he's like, I've just won a big election. I'm feeling a little sure of myself, pretty confident, you know? Supreme Court has been a little bit conservative. What if, Congress, if I add a judge for every judge that's 70 years old and who served on the Supreme Court for 10 years? So I can nominate 6 more judges and make the Supreme Court from 9 to 15. Go ahead, you have.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. I was like, did he basically initiate the non-judge Supreme Court, or you just said it was non-15?
That's what he wanted. What's the reaction? Even by people in the Democratic Party? No. It seemed like an overreach of power. When people think about a president just changing the Constitution, you're not recommending an amendment, and you just want to do that. Well, we have a tradition that feels like that is too much of a, overreach of power. It's dictatorial in here. And so people thought that, and that's why sometimes they call this court package scheme for it. That's definitely there. Hopefully you understand that. But the reason for that, because the Supreme Court was making decisions against him. And it's like, and he came up with this. And he especially felt better after he got reelected. And by overwhelming majority. He only lost 2 states. So he's thinking that he has a mandate to do things. But reached a little bit too far there. Supreme Court, I think, got a little intimidated, though. Because I think they were looking to the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority, and they were going to decide if it was constitutional or not. They said it was constitutional. So I still might have had a little bit intimidating effect. Not like he threatened him, but just that like he would maybe do something with the power. Okay, so go ahead. We'll just wrap it up.
This kind of like jumping ahead.
No, sorry.
But like in the video, it said that he He wanted to run a third term. Did he actually run the third term, or he was just like
He runs for 4 terms. The third term is, right now is in 1940. It's before we got into the war. It's unprecedented, but he thought this was it was bad times. And he runs again in 1944. And a lot of people who were around him thought that he probably would not, because his health was not good, but he decided, because that's in the middle of World War II. It's the only time in history, of course, that we, like the president more than 2 terms. So he felt like he could do this. Yes.
So a president can be in office for more than 2 terms. No other president has.
No, you cannot. Constitution, because they passed the 22nd Amendment after when Truman took over. They said you can't do that. They want to prevent that, so you cannot serve more than 2 terms. If your vice president passes away, you can serve a maximum of 10 years. Okay.
Is it 2 consecutive terms or is it just 2 terms?
2 terms like that and everything. So you can actually if you
president
serve
did
one
that?
term, you're like, let's just say Trump loses, that he could run, in 2024 like that, So like that. I mean, again, that would be allowed. Right there. But it's because of Roosevelt like that. Now, for review to end it on a good note, why is it that presidents traditionally have never run more than 2 terms? What is the
George Washington.
oh oh I love you. No, I see. I just love that connection. Okay, like that. There you go. End up on a good note. Okay, like that. Love you all. Good job, and I'll send this out.